Certainly what we find is that companies have really never held customer service as high as they do today. It's becoming incredibly important to them as part of their business. And I think that's mostly because their end customers are demanding it. It's a differentiator. It's something that is now very much expected in what is done, and playing just a huge part of how they perform not only their products, but how they support their customers. It's interesting because if you go back even 2 decades in contact centers to kind of the early stages, it was a pretty static environment for many, many years. It didn't change very often. It was an incredibly stable type of an environment. But in the past 5 years, we've probably seen more change than we've seen in the previous 20 years. And that's because technology has changed a lot. Previously, it was more about getting things smaller, and it wasn't so much about the technology really changing. So it was reducing expense and taking up less space. Now it's much more about the technology advancing the way that you interact with your customers. And so it's changing so rapidly that some of the input we get is from our customers is how is it best that they keep up with that technology and sort out what's important and what's not important. So it's gone from very static for a long period of time to incredibly dynamic in the last few years. Well, if you think about contact centers, the idea of unified communications has been a concept that contact centers have pretty much always had. So as an example, if you've been in the enterprise, this idea of logging on and logging off to your communication device is very foreign. But in the contact center, signing on and signing off was very typical. Also, this idea of being available and not available is very typical in contact centers, very unusual at the enterprise level. And being able to tell who's available and who's not available, again, very typical in contact centers, unusual at the enterprise level. Well, now unified communications has really extended those capabilities out to the enterprise. So knowing who's present and who's not present. Something that contact centers have had for years, something that unified communications is now bringing to the enterprise. So we're very glad to see that, because what it does is it extends the capabilities that contact centers have had for a long time now out to the enterprise. And so the enterprise is able to take advantage of that the way contact centers have taken advantage. I certainly think that the consumer or the end user is ultimately going to demand the capabilities that unified communications brings to the contact center, because it's so evident to the end consumer when they're dealing with a contact center that have high degrees of communications and high degrees of collaboration. So it's something that's not just used internally, but it's something that extends all the way out to the customer. And the customer, of course, is who chooses who they do business with and who they don't do business with. And who they can get the best service, support, and sales from is who they're going to choose. So unified communications is becoming a differentiator, and contact centers are using it as a differentiator. So we believe that we're going to see the adoption rate ramp up very quickly. Now, I think we'll see it first at the enterprise level, and then it will work its way into the contact center, because contact centers have traditionally been relatively conservative, have been slow to adopt new technologies in some cases, but in this particular case, we're seeing contact centers adopted at a faster rate than we've seen in the past. I still think we'll see it, though, at the enterprise first, then moving its way into the contact center, and to be competitive, you ultimately will have to have that capability. From the, I think a couple of ways. From the contact center point of view, of course, unified communications is becoming increasingly important and is used more and more. And of course, social media is becoming more prevalent in the contact center. It's just another form of communication. It's another form of knowing about the customer and the customer to be able to communicate. So what we really see is social media as being a conduit into the contact center, and then unified communications being a conduit from the contact center to the enterprise. So I certainly think that there's a place where being able to take advantage of both of those is going to be important, and so they really help each other. I don't know that we'll see high degrees of integration between social media and unified communications, but I think they'll be used side by side, both being somewhat equally important. Well, if you think about unified communications, think about it in the form of presence, think about it in the form of easier communicating between a person and a group of people. But now once that group of people or those two people are communicating, them being able to share information once the communications channel is established is important. So us being able to communicate is one thing. Us being able to communicate and share rich information easily is another level of capability. And that's where we see unified communication and collaboration working together very nicely. So think of unified communications as our ability to communicate, and in different forms, in different ways, and easier. But then think of collaboration as a way for us to be able to share that information once we're able to communicate. Now, in some cases, it will start with collaboration and then expand into communication. For example, I may be on a company's website and I may be collaborating in some way, whether it's me to the website or me to someone else. And then I may want to elevate that into communication. So I may start with collaboration and then want to communicate. There'll be other times where I may be communicating and then I want to share information or collaborate. So it will depend on the circumstance as to maybe the order or how prevalent one is without the other. But ultimately, virtually every transaction is going to have a form of communication and a form of collaboration. And that's why we're seeing unified communications and collaboration really expanding at about the same rate.